Hi, everybody. I'm back with my program that I like that works. Yesterday's was okay, but I prefer this one. It's just easier. Um, okay, so back to our take five. And today's a pretty special day. Um, it is Constitution Day. This is the day that the Constitution was signed. Um, and so I have a few books on the Constitution. So I'm hoping that I can get through all five of them in 5 minutes. We shall see how well I do today. All right, so first up, in case you weren't familiar with the Constitution in general, I have a very, 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 very small book, which gives you the basics, though. Okay, so who wrote it, when was it written, all that jazz. This is just kind of your basic 411 on the Constitution, and then you can read some of the other books and dig into it a little bit more. So the next one I have is oh, where is it? There it is. Okay. So this one is really, really cool. Not only does it have a really cool cover, which is the Constitution, but it goes line by line. Now, I know you think, like, oh, that's going to be completely boring. But no, it's fascinating because I don't know if you have been paying attention, but this was written 200 years ago, more than 200 years ago. And some of the language that the founders used in the document is not language that we would necessarily use today. So by going line by line, they kind of explain what those words actually were intended to mean, based on historical research. So it is a book you can read like from cover to cover, but it's also a book like if you're looking at the Constitution and you're like, I don't know what they meant by pursuit of happiness, you can just go in and you can find that spot and then you can read about that. So it's both reference book but also like really cool historical document analysis all in one. All right. So then we have I'll start yeah, I'll go with this one. Okay. So we have the Constitution proper, and if you read either the intro book or any book about the Constitution or Wikipedia, you'll know that one of the big issues that the founders debated was, should we have a list of all of the rights that citizens have? And they eventually decided, when the Constitution was signed and ratified, it did not have that list. That list was added a couple years later, and we know it as the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments to the Constitution. And there were actually 12 proposed amendments in the original Bill of Rights that James Madison wrote, but two of them didn't really have anything to do with the rights of an individual person, so they were scrapped and we were left with a nice even number of 10. So this book focuses only on the Bill of Rights. It does give you a little bit of background of the Constitution, a little bit more in depth than the intro book, but it's mostly focused on the Bill of Rights, and kind of like the first book, the second book that we read, it kind of breaks it down into its parts, not line by line, but there's a section on freedom of religion and freedom of the press and freedom of speech, and then it kind of, chunks the rest of them into their own category. All right, so there's that one. Then we have what is probably, I think, the most interesting, but also probably the most controversial book in the lineup, and that is called Fault Lines in the Constitution. And it's a pretty new book. It just came out, I think, a couple of years ago. Again, if you have been paying at all attention to anything political, you will know that a lot of our debates have to do with what is constitutional and what is not. And there's some very vague parts of the Constitution. They weren't very specific, mostly because they couldn't agree on what the specificity should be. So they just kind of left it open for interpretation. Well, that's sometimes caused a lot of issues. For instance, the not addressing of slavery. We're still feeling those ripple effects today. And rightly so, because in my opinion, that's something they should have addressed, but they didn't because it was a different time and they felt they couldn't. So this kind of tells you what some of those issues are and how they affect us today. And then last but not least, we'll end on a happier note. This is a really cool book. This is Our Constitution by Khizr Khan. And he spoke at the 2016 Democratic National Convention. You should not read this because he spoke at the Democratic Convention. You should read this because it's really, really cool, because he basically says, okay, as an American citizen, this is what I believe our Constitution is doing for me, the individual person, not the government, not the Supreme Court, not the president, but just an ordinary average person. This is how I interpret the Constitution. And some of the stuff that he says you might agree with, and some of the stuff he says you might not agree with, but it's still a very interesting read, and he's a very cool guy. So you should totally read that. All right, so I went a little bit over, but I think if you read all of those or even any of those, you will definitely get a better sense of what the Constitution is, how it works for us, how sometimes it doesn't work for us, and maybe some predictions on how it might continue to affect us in the future. So I hope you request one of those books. In case you're watching this, don't forget that Cohort A's book requests are due Monday, and Cohort Z's book requests are due next Thursday, a week from today. So don't forget to get those in, and I will be happy to deliver them to you. And so you can read more about the Constitution. Thanks. Have a good day. Bye.